Hello everyone, it is I, Dark Symphony 777 with another fanfiction review. As always, a link to the story will be in the description below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell for notification, and leave a comment in the comment section below on your thoughts on the story. And finally, this is my opinion. My opinion is not indicative of everyone in the world, so please respect that. Before I get into the review, you may notice that I'm actually showing the screen instead of the webcam. The reason for this is, as of right now, for the time being, it's temporary, but I don't know how long it's gonna last. I have to record from my car because it's very, very hard to record when you don't really have a room to sleep in, and therefore you're able to record and set everything up. And two, even when I kept trying to record inside my house, my family kept arguing and yelling and screaming. And finally, doing the face cam inside of a car is really disgusting because it's hot in here. It's like a red car with a black internal, so it heats up a lot, and I have to keep a fan on me at all times just so I can actually stay in here. And I get kind of groggy because I don't think anyone wants to see me half naked. I don't think so. So, for the time being, this is what I'm gonna have to work with. So the story I am reviewing today is Shadowchasers Risen Nemesis by Luxnero. It is a Yu-Gi-Oh! 5d's fanfiction, and the reason I wanted to review this fanfiction this year is because, as you all know, last year I reviewed the majority of the Shadowchasers fanfiction series by Occam's Razor last year. And one of the things that stood out in the last story I reviewed, which was Tournament of Shadows, was the plotline with Ace and Kenshin. And I said that was really my only big problem with that story, was it kind of fell on two sides. One, Ace was probably the weakest character in Tournament of Shadows because he kind of took a backseat to Kenshin. And the problem is this specific plotline needed you to understand the backstory of Kenshin as a player in order to get actually invested in it. It's like, and with Risen's Nemesis, yeah, it fixed one problem, which was the more minor problem, which is showcasing who Ace is and what she's about, and kind of fixing that. We still got the big issue of the fact that we don't have a full backstory on Kenshin and player, so that plotline is still the weakest of Tournament of Shadows. Not to mention there's no follow-up. But we got Risen Nemesis, and this is a very, very entertaining story. Just give me a second, I gotta mute Discord. So, the story of the story is as follows. This story takes place in Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas! Yeah, there's not really much of a plot in the traditional sort of sense, because this one's more of a sort of, I guess you can say this one feels the most out of all the Shadowchasers stories as a sort of anime-esque adventure, because one thing that I kind of appreciated in the other Shadowchasers stories is the sense of realism. We have real players, they follow the ban list, they do all this, and basically to have fun. And so... Ow. I lost my thought. I lost my train of thought. I don't know why I was blanking out. That's kind of the consequences of not having a script. But I blanked out again. Sorry, it's just uncomfortable here. So, the story stars the Las Vegas Shadowchasers. It is Hyde Vane, I believe his name, Ace, Faye Valentine. Yes, it's a reference to that Faye Valentine from Cowboy Bebop. And Baron. Yugioh. I forgot what the name of it. What's Ace's last name? I completely forgot what Ace's last name is. She has a last name, but for the life of me, I can't remember it. And they're just their normal job of being Shadowchasers in Sin City. It starts out with, as pretty much all Shadowchaser stories, where it doesn't really have a conceptual plot yet. The first couple chapters are just introducing you to each member, and you see a duel, you see how their deck works, you see all the shenanigans they get into. This story does something different in the fact that there are other duelists kind of wander around and you see them duel. And this is where Risen Nemesis truly shines. These characters are wacky. These characters are kooky. They're probably the best written Shadowchasers original characters of everyone except for maybe one character. We'll get to that when we get to the characters. But for the most part, with the plot itself, it follows a 2-act structure. The first act structure takes place from chapter 1 all the way to, where is it? To, I believe, chapter 25 or 26, around here. And then second act follows the rest of the story. The first act follows them hunting a guy named Childman, who is a loan shark, who's known as the Loan Shark because it's revealed that he is a shark demon named Sabito. Yeah, it's weird. He's a shark. He's a shark who happens to be called the Loan Shark, who happens to be a loan shark who owns a loan company. And basically, the story kind of just chases after him. There's not really much in this first act in the way of character development or character arcs, because most of the character arcs and character developments happen in Act 2. It's a minor complaint in Act 1 that we don't really get much character development in Act 1. However, it's for the most part literally just a minor complaint. It doesn't really detract from anything that's going on, because they still get arcs, they still get character development. It just takes a very, very long time because it's supposed to emulate that sort of in like the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. First act, the first arc, and the first couple episodes are just giving us a baseline of what the characters are, how they behave, their motivations, and stuff like that. And then as the series goes on, then we get their character arcs, we get their character development. So in that way, it does make sense why Lux Nero. Outside, I wonder why Lux Nero sounds familiar. I don't know, seems like a type of guy who do YouTube. They would. I lost my train of thought with that side mark. Curse you! Anyway, it does make a lot of sense why it would be formatted in the way it's formatted, because it's trying to better emulate. And I think this story over Occam Razors, no offense to Occam, but this story actually does the most of feeling the most like the Yu-Gi-Oh anime. Because not only is it more portrayed more anime-esque in terms of the art, in terms of the arc, the action, the writing. There's a lot of comedic moments. A lot of characters kind of just draw along. They sweat drop. They kind of face fault. The monsters, they behave really ridiculously. Like they completely act over the top, but they also don't act over the top in certain instances. Like, for instance, in Baron's first duel, when he's using fiends, and he doesn't want the lady. He basically orders his monsters like, hit her, but do it gently. And his monsters basically just look back at him. It's like, fine. And so they just basically walk up, super macho, and then they just flick, and then just flick the girl's forehead. It's like, there, you're happy. Yes. They do goofy pose. There's a lot of personality that most of the other Shadowchasers stories I've read is in here. This story has a lot. From a storyline perspective, from a character perspective, from a pacing perspective, this story has a lot of personality. And I think that's why this is like my favorite. Well, second favorite. I probably like Tournament of Shadows slightly better than this story. As well as any of the other Shadowchasers. Because I think this story specifically highlights the big flaw in the early Shadowchaser stories, in the fact that those ones are trying to be too serious, too dramatic, and it kind of lets you focus more on like the repetitiveness of the duels. That's which leads to another thing that this story did better than those stories, is the fact that these stories are not, when it comes to the duels themselves, are not really repetitive. You see the good guys actually lose quite frequently. We actually see the bad guys actually duel several times and even beat the good guys. And we get plenty of time to get to know who the bad guys are, because half of the chapter is like dedicated to giving us more of them. It's like, hey, you want more bad guys? Here you go. You got the villains? You like the villains? Here you go. Here's more villainy. And that makes these characters more relatable. That makes them more entertaining. And it actually makes you more connected to these stories. Unlike, say, like the first two Shadowchasers. I'm going to be doing a lot of comparison between this story and specifically just the original two. The original Shadowchasers and Power Primordial, because those two I think are the weakest. Now that I read this one, they're very much at the bottom. Where it doesn't... The stories are just very repetitive. Not the stories. The duels are very repetitive. They don't really lack a lot of personality. That's why I liked the stories going from Torment forward, because the author tried to inject more personality, focus more on the villains, and focus and kind of achieve a balance that the first two stories didn't have, and that's fine. Like I said, the only problem is for just Shadowchasers 1 and 2. The second act has them trying to unlock a conspiracy theory, because when they beat Childsman, they find out something. They realize, okay, you're under arrest for all this, and this. Hold on. I may be a loan shark, but I don't do summons. Who else could? I don't know. No, I will admit fault in everything except for the summoning. Are you sure you didn't? No, I didn't do the summoning. Now where's my 10 bottles of seawater? And so they use the simple fact that he didn't do one specific crime in order to find out that there's a second conspiracy that was using Childsman as a front to hide their wrongdoings, and then so they kind of trying to follow the clue. It follows a more mystery aspect that way that the other story, that actually none of the other stories except for Tournament of Shadows really had. It resembles more of a mystery novel rather than an adventure, which makes sense since you can see on the screen the genres are mystery and adventure. They actually do crime work. You actually see them, talking to contacts and talking to like buddies in the police force, going around and basically trying to dig up clues as they can, following leads. It feels more, and I think that's another thing that the other stories didn't do. They didn't really behave more like police shows. And that's strictly only on the first two stories, but the point still stands. This one feels very much like an actual mystery novel. Like they're still going on the adventure, but they have all these mystery plot lines that they start. They give you the tip of the thread, and you follow it, and you try and figure out the dots and try and figure out what's going on. And then you also have a wild card character, which we'll talk about in a second. That's really well done. There's tons of twists and turns. it's very, very fun, and it's very, very entertaining. So I guess that's what I gotta get used to recording in a goddamn car. I guess that's it with the plot. The characters. I love these characters. If probably hold on one second. I want to check something related to the tier list that I made with the OCs because I gotta move. Because I just realized I gotta move Ace. Never mind. I just realized that I did not put Ace on the tier list. I gotta do that. After I did this recording because it took me until going through the tier list to find out that I completely did not leave. I left Ace off the tier list because I wanted to read the story. Never mind then. So we have a smorgasbord of characters. We're moving on to the characters. I apologize because I'm kind of jumping across. It's been a while and I've had a stressful several weeks. I wanted to record this video like last week. I had inventory at my job that kind of ate up so much time. But regardless. The characters. The single best part, I'm not going to spoil it. The single best part of the story is the characters. These characters are endlessly entertaining and over the top. Let's start with the most over the top character. Not even any of the Shadowchasers. It's one of the villains, Jack. He is an Ancient Gear player. He's basically dressed as a Wild West cowboy, and he's basically at a climax all the time. Yes, that's his running joke. Every single time when he duels, it's like, whatever time when I duel from beginning to end. Where was I? I got distracted. Someone needed to ask me a question. Oh, yeah. And from beginning to the end of the duel, I'm at a climax. And he says that a lot. And people make fun of it. You do realize what you're saying is an innuendo, right? Say, I don't give a care. Let me continue my climax. Ancient Gear Golem climax all over that duel. That little girl. Hi. I love Jack. I love Jack. He's such a goofy character at first because when you first introduce him, he has the mark of the Shadowchaser. So you're given and he's actually the duelist you see in the very first chapter. This very first chapter right here is actually dueled by Jack against another character, and he's hunting a werewolf. And you basically see how goofy he is. He talks about he's a climax, and the wolf is like, what? Why are you talking about climaxes? Why? And then after Jack wins, he's like, all right, so you're gonna arrest him. And Jack goes, well, I would do that if I was a Shadowchaser. And he basically pulls out the gun and shanks the wolf. Well, why did he do this? Well, it's eventually revealed, and this is a spoiler, but this is like the only bad guy that I'm going to be spoiling. At the end of the story, it's revealed that he has a very, very distrusting. He does not trust the Shadowchasers because the Shadowchasers, they're only a human organization, and so that's why he has to mark, showing he's a Shadowchaser to kind of fall the shadows into a false sense of security. When he was a kid, he saw his father was a scientist working for someone, and his father eventually got killed by one of those someone's subordinates because the guy realized not only did he not have enough time to finish the mixture and finish all the science stuff like behind it, but he found out that doing this is not exactly the best idea, and then he gets killed for it. And the Shadowchasers, they never found the culprit, which was a werewolf with a cross scars over its face, intersecting the eyes. And since the Shadowchasers never found him, he grew to dischase the Shadowchasers, which is why he wears the mark, to kind of give them that false sense of security, so he can basically hit them and rock them, and all that. And he's a really entertaining character. Then we get the main four. We get Ace, who's basically a tomboy. She's a very rough and tumble girl, likes punching things, likes screaming, But in the second act, we found that she's very insecure because she's trying to deliberately place herself under the shadow of Ember, who was the main character of the first and second Shadowchasers. That's why I was comparing the two. Why is she comparing them? Because she wanted to join the Shadowchasers. She sees shadows. She's like, okay, I want to join. And then she sees this huge tale of this girl from Japan who literally saved the world from from being flooded whole on her very first job, and she kind of gets insecure when she gets compared to that. The thing, and here's the twist. Like I said, she doesn't. No one's comparing her. She's trying to forcibly put herself in the shadow because she does do a lot of good things. She does act goofy like the rest of the crew. She has friends. She does slack off a lot to go hang out with the wereweasel Kion. But when the chips are down, she's actually going and saving the day. She's rescuing people. She saved the world. But she still doesn't believe in herself because she doesn't believe she's as good as Ember. Because despite that, everyone's saying, "Oh, you're good on your own. You can't expect to be under the shadow." It's like, well, I want to be as good as her. Like, problem is, she got lucky because if you read the original Shadowchasers, she more or less worked for the bad guy unintentionally, and thus she kind of got wrapped up into it. But go watch my review on that story for that. But it is a neat little wrinkle to the whole Under the Shadow, where instead of everyone comparing you to her, she's kind of forcibly doing it, and everyone's not really a big fan of that because because they want her to be herself. You have Baron, who is a suave ladies man. Here, Baron Diego never has the ladies. Insert Mexican maramba. Salsa dancing. And we finally get his character arc in the second act, where he actually failed. It's implied. We don't know the full story behind it. It's implied that he actually failed his test because his test was he was supposed to stop what's called a malevolent envy. And we're actually introduced to an envy very early in the story. But Baron's not around. He's actually out of town doing a different mission. And he finds out about the envy, and then we find out that his very first mission was actually trying to stop an envy who basically took the body of another boy and basically got her own body. And he's kind of weighed him down for a long time until the end, where he actually meets the envy introduced in this story, and he finds out, well, I can save this other family member, because it turned out it's a family member. It is. So it's a neat little wrinkle because we're always told, like, oh, you can't join in unless you pass the test. But now we have this guy who's implied to still be part of the organization despite the fact he passed the test, because it turns out there's not really a lot of info about this specific shadow. So they kind of gave him a pass. They might have given him a pass. He's also the customary guy that has like the multiple decks. He wields a fiend deck, but he also wields a Karibo deck because Karibo. Fring. You never know when you might need a Karibo. Ding, 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 ding. Karibo, save me. But he's a very entertaining character. He's very over the top. He kind of feels like he's kind of inspired by Puss in Boots from Shrek. Never hurt the ladies. My God! And all that jazz. You have Faye, who's basically just... Okay, I admit Faye's just really angry all the time. She's just a very angry woman. She constantly hits everyone, and of course they do the anime bump things. She's pulling on everyone's ears, like, you better stop smoking. No! ah. But she's not afraid to stoop to their level if like it's justified. Like she can't, like just like them, she sweat drops, she fall, it does the anime face plant. But she's usually the straight man to everyone else's kind of over the top shenanigans whenever that happens, and that really works for her. I think every single like when you're trying to do like a comedy thing, you need a straight man, and I think Faye actually works as that straight man, especially when it gets to the point where she's like, Vance, what? Hit me with a stick. I know you have one, but you don't. After the day I'm having, I fucking need one. Oh, god damn it. That's good. But it's eventually revealed that she's actually the oldest, and while she's not she's not in charge of this specific group. That's Vance. She was apparently, again, this is implication. She was implied that actually she was offered the leadership of that area, but she declined because it's revealed in the story that she had a lover that she cared for a lot, and he was actually the previous leader, and something happened to him, and her arc is basically just trying to find out what happened, and that's more or less her character. And then you get Vance. Oh boy, I like Vance. I think he's the best. I think from the four main characters, he is the best. He's basically your classic 1950s, 1940s, 1950s radio detective. He's the guy. Remember when I said they do actual police work? He's the guy that does the police work. He was an ex-New York detective. He discovered that he knows how to do he can see shadows, and so he joins the Las Vegas Shadowchasers, and basically does his own thing. He smokes a lot. He basically wears the trench coat. He has a hat. He doesn't really like when people touch the hat. It's like, don't touch my hat. He has like cigarette stashes everywhere. Like Pinkie Pie would be proud, except if Pinkie Pie smoked. I don't think Pinkie Pie is the type of person to smoke. He's an overall entertaining character. He's really the only character that has like original cards out of the group. That's another thing what I like is when the main characters have these unique archetypes. Like there's one of the reasons why I liked Bruno von Klein is the fact his deck was entirely made up of the Wonderland cards, and this guy's kind of the same way. He uses like Japanese yokai. Of course, you have like actual cards that do exist, like Mizuki, because come on, you're running a zombie deck. Even in 2023, zombie decks run Mizuki. Like it's literally one of the best support cards. Probably if that existed at the time, he'd probably use it as a zombie. No, wait, he uses like Japanese. He uses zombie wouldn't fit. He uses Mizuki, Gozuki, the Nine-Tailed Fox. The Malice of Flame. I'm surprised that the author didn't have him play Kasha like a single time, because Kasha is a real Japanese yokai. It's more surprising than anything is Synchro monsters are all like Japanese like hirely yokai things. The only one I didn't particularly like was the fact that he summoned Okami. Yes, Okami from that Okami, except for the fact that's Amaterasu. That's not Okami. Okami is the name of the game. Amaterasu is the character. I got completely confused by that part. Yes, there is also crossovers with other franchises here, not just Okami. Hell, the most random crossover was the fact they had this person put a random Kingdom Hearts 2 boss in the story. I shit you not. This person had the gall to do that. No idea why. No idea why. And even then, we have like very entertaining side characters. Like you have the Carbuncle who constantly complains about he's not cute. You have the Bugbear who's just basically just working for Lone Shark and he's just like, I'm just doing my job, man. You had Kion, the Were Ermine, who's basically just a very effeminate Were Weasel. He calls himself Were Ermine, who has an infatuation for Ace, but he's like, oh, woe is me. Time to do kabuki. It's like, do you duel? I may have won about 2 or 3 world tournaments in my lifetime. Wait, you're a professional duelist? Perhaps. He's just over top. There's also like there's Childsman. Childsman's a very entertaining guy. He's basically just this suave shark man who has the most insane bill on this planet. It's like, I'm going to put so many people in debt that by process of proxy, I will put America in debt. They will owe so much money to me that I will rule them all. And even they're like, that doesn't really make any sense. Shut up. You also have what the hell is that dream traveler shadow called? I have no idea. But it's probably my. You know what? Let's look. I want to see. I want to see if I can find this person. No. This one. I'm literally just trying. I'm trying to find this character's name. Just let me have this. Oh, Taros, who's basically obsessed with like strength, and his catchphrase is like, "My strength will make you cry. My strength will make you cry tears from your face." Like, can you stop talking about strength? My strength. Actually, is it weird that I actually want to see a story about that character? Because I would love to see a story about that character. Just willingly letting people to willingly possess him, so he basically can live. Because apparently, his species, they have to possess people every once in a while just to be able to live, and so he actually just willingly asks him, like, "Can I possess your body for a couple hours?" Why? Because otherwise I would die. It's just going to be a couple hours. I'm a man of my word. All you'll do is, like, hear me talking about strength. And you will be able to see everything that goes on. So if you don't want me to do anything, just let me know. All right. Which is basically what happens. In, like, his first appearance, he basically takes over Kion. And then he basically just willingly shoos everyone out and then boards it up. Just to get Ace's attention. He's like, I am here to show you my strength makes you cry. And he's just a ridiculous character. And I love that character. And I love Taros. And then finally, the last character we have is Common. Luxero. I think those two names have a connection. I don't know why. Must be on his DeviantArt page where people call him Common. Yeah. I don't know. But Common is a wild card character. He basically, honestly, the best way I can describe him is Deadpool. He's literally just Deadpool. He breaks the fourth wall. He constantly makes references. He makes no sense half the time. He's super strong. He's like, oh, I can do all this. He's like, all right, takes this hammer. Ding. Did you just block this one hand? Yeah. Well, time to kick some ass. However, it's eventually revealed that Common is actually something of a very good character he had. I'm not going to spoil it because I honestly want to keep this specific part spoiler free. But there is a very good reason why he's doing things, and it has something to do with the synchro monsters he has. It is foreshadowed, but I do love Common. He's a very ridiculous character, and he's pretty much the embodiment of what this story is about. Just a ridiculously entertaining, fun time. Grammar errors. There is a couple grammar errors here and there, but nothing too bad. Unless you want to say unless you want to count him renaming Okami, Amaterasu as Okami, an error. That's not really an error because he still spelled Okami right. He just put the wrong name there. Yeah. Pacing wise, the pacing is really well done. Throughout the story, at certain points, it constantly flips between the good guys and the bad guys, so you're constantly giving plenty of time to each side, unlike the rest of the story, unlike the rest of the Shadowchasers stories, where it mainly focuses on the good guys, and so we're not really given enough time to really get acquainted with the bad guys. Or the bad guys do show up, they only show up for like a tiny bit, and then they're gone, and then you don't read about them for a little bit, and then they come back a little bit. What I'm trying to say is, when it comes to pacing between the good guys and the bad guys, there is a perfect balance where you're given enough time to really get to know these characters. You're really getting the time to care about these characters, like Jack with his whole climaxing thing and his ancient gears. You really see him kind of. You really get a feel for his character, and then you find out he actually cares about another villain, Mira, who's just basically a secretary, and she's like very nervous. And him willingly agreeing to surrender himself to the Shadowchasers if they basically let them save her. But then they realize, well, he's not a Shadow, so he's kind of out of our jurisdiction. He's like, all right, we're running. Nah, I'm just kidding. It eventually revealed at the end he kind of joins the Shadowchasers because it's like, well, you want to join? All right. as long as my girlfriend joins. All right. And of course, Mira runs like BES, like pew pew. And it's just a very fun time. The stakes aren't really that high, so the story doesn't really get that dramatic, except for like one character. That character I'm deliberately not talking about because that character's only introduced in the second act, and plus he's kind of a big spoiler. I don't want to talk about that one character. But I do love the pacing. Everything's structured really well. The duels are actually worth reading because they're not really repetitive, aside from the morphing jar shenanigans that I complained about in the first Shadowchasers. I didn't like it in that story. I don't like it in this story. However, this one's kind of at least balances out that at half the time it does drag away from the duel to actually focus on other things that are happening at the same time to try to advance that instead of just focusing exclusively on the duel. So it's not as bad as the original Shadowchasers. There's that. Would I recommend this story? Let's get to the final part. Yes, I still maintain my thought that even after finishing this story a week ago, because I finished the story a week and a half ago. Like I said, I wanted to review the story last week, but I had stuff involving my job that prevented me from doing it. That I really did love the story. It's very entertaining. It's a breath of fresh air. There's a lot you can continue on, like the stuff with the unnamed character, common story. I won't talk about that. Ace and Baron's characters that haven't really been fully fleshed out. Faye's really the only character that had closure, kind of, unless you can. Yeah, you also have a lot of things you can do to branch off into spin-offs or sequels. That is really, really well done. That you don't necessarily have to, like, because Shadowchasers is like a recursive fanfiction, so someone else could just easily go, you know what? I want to take this specific plot point and write my own fan fiction. Get out. And have a lot of fun with that. Favorite part? I mean, if we're talking about like favorite duel, probably the duel between. I don't really have a favorite duel. I like a lot of the duels. I guess you could say the two duels with Tauros, because I just like Tauros as a character concept of just this shadow who willingly possesses people and talk about how his strength will make people cry. I just like that. Just find them entertaining. But my favorite singular part would actually have to be, I guess Faye getting some closure of just her. No, not Faye. Yeah, I guess you could say Faye getting her closure. I think that's good enough. Like her final duel against the Taoist necromancer is good enough. I think it's fine with the shadow duels in the context of as she loses more life points, she kind of slowly reveals what happened. No, not the Taoist duelist, the her teacher brought back to life, and as he loses life points, he basically reveals more and more about what happened. It's actually really well done. Wouldn't be my favorite duel. Like I said, my favorite written duels are probably this ones with Tauros because I just like Tauros so much as a character. But as a singular moment, Faye getting her closure at least closes her character arc for a bit. What would I change? There's two things I would change. One, change Okami into Amaterasu. Easy as that. The second one actually involves context. So I need to actually go to a specific this question, right? This chapter right here. Question. In the reason I have to go to this chapter is because this really as you could say, as someone who actually plays Yu-Gi-Oh, I still play Yu-Gi-Oh. Reading this chapter kind of really pissed me off, and I just want to talk about it. I know the author probably doesn't want to fix this because it's such a minor thing. But but just let me rant for a second. Just let me rant. So in this chapter, we have Diego Berendorego dueling against the carbuncle I mentioned earlier, who hates being called cute. And the carbuncle, he uses what's called a quiz deck. This was a deck featured in the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime in about 2004, 2005. And everything was going well until he got to one very specific question that kind of just this moment by itself completely just got rid of the immersion for me. The question was, name the 3 alternate win conditions in Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, normally, this wouldn't be a big deal until you realize 2 things. One, this story was published in 2009. Why is that a big deal? Well, the game constantly evolves. The game constantly adapts, and a lot of cards get a thing called an errata. So an errata in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is basically when they change the text of a card to either make it more clearer what it's supposed to do, or trying to nerf very, very powerful cards in order to get them off the ban list. So, let's do an example. Sangan. Sangan is a very, very old card, level 3 Dark Fiend. If it leaves the field, if it gets sent to the graveyard, its effect goes off where you can add any monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand. And so this card was eventually hit with an errata to basically say if you add one, you cannot use the added monster's name or summon it or use its effect for the rest of the turn. So basically they basically made it weaker and by hitting it with errata because it was very, very degenerate card, especially now in modern days. If Sangan wasn't errata, then you would basically just go, oh, well, now you just plus off because guess what? Its effect is not a once per turn. That's like the difference between Yu-Gi-Oh! And other card games. You have to be very, 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 very careful of the wording of a card because you get the wording wrong, you can misplay and screw up. But going back to this, at the time when the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX anime came out with this quiz deck, there was 3 alternate win conditions. So basically, a win condition is a card that lets you win via a specific condition that the card has. So basically, you either in Yu-Gi-Oh, you either win by reducing your opponent's life points to 0, or you have them draw, or you basically have them run out of cards, so they can't draw anymore, and so they lose on not being able to make any more plays. At the time, there was 3 alternate win conditions. There was Exodia, the forbidden one. Its condition is if you have all 5 pieces of Exodia, the left hand, the right hand, the left leg, the right leg, and Exodia, the forbidden one, you just win. You just had to have them in your hand. Card number 2, Final Countdown. It's a spell card. You play it, you pay 2,000 life points, and then after 20 turns have passed, if no one has basically won the duel yet, you automatically win the duel. And finally, there is Destiny Board, which was a trap card. You basically play it during every one of your opponent's end turns. You basically activate a piece of the Destiny Board, DEATH in the OCG or FINAL in the TCG, from your deck to the spell chop zone. And if you have all 5 pieces, you win. Here's the thing. In season 2 of GX, and this was eventually made into a real card, they've released a card called, I gotta actually show her. Let me just, this lady, right here, Vinamanaga, the deity of poisonous snakes. This is a win condition. And normally, I wouldn't be complaining, because, like, okay, this card, maybe the card doesn't exist. Here's the thing. In the original Shadowchasers, not only is this still very much a real card, but Vinamanaga is actually a real character in the context of the Shadow kind, because she's basically the god that the snake people, the Ophidias, actually worship. So she's not only a real card, but she's a real person. How she works: she cannot be normal summon set, must first be special summoned with Rise of the Snake Deity. Rise of the Snake Deity is normal trap. You can only activate it if Vinamanaga, the king of poisonous snakes, is destroyed by card effect. And all it does is let you summon her from the deck. Or by its own effect. Gains 500 attack for each reptile monster in your graveyard. Neither player can target this card with card effects. Also, it's unaffected by other cards and their effects. When this card is destroyed by battle sent to graveyard, you can banish one other reptile monster in your graveyard, special summon this card. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, place 1 Hyper Venom counter on it. When the 3rd Hyper Venom counter is placed on this card, you win the duel. This card is an alternate win condition. And so I was dragged out of the immersion where Vinamanaga was not mentioned, because it's very likely that these cards are hit with erratas, and even in other Shadow Chaser stories, they do mention an errata. Like in this story, they mention that the custom boss monster that all the Shadow Chasers get, Jalal the Stormbreaker, would get a retrained version, which is basically him with an errata. So they do exist. So why doesn't this chapter either name 3 of the alternate name 3 alternate win conditions, or name that exist, or name all 4 alternate win conditions? Because all you have to do is you really just have to change the number 3 to 4, and then have Baron mention Vinamanaga. That's just, I can even show you. Let's see. Nope, this one. Where is it? Alright, so yeah, here it is. Now you got 10 seconds out of name each of the 3 specific cards that, see, That's the thing. He worded it kind of weirdly. He said 3 specific cards, except for the fact the story was released in 2009. So the Nobunaga exists. Also, you can technically count last turn. That's kind of weird. So I don't know whether I have to count last turn or not. But honestly, the only big thing I would change, just change this to say 4, or just get rid of name three specific name 3 cards that can cause a win condition, and then just, or if you want to be specific, have just replace the 3 or 4 and have a mention of a Nobunaga. That's really all I would change. And also have better foreshadowing to the final villain, because the final villain turns out to be the mayor of Las Vegas, and he's kind of the weakest character. I think if there's any foreshadowing on him, he'd probably be a better villain. But I'll probably talk about him more if someone mentions him in the comments. Now, regardless, that is my review on Shadowchasers Risen Nemesis. I know it's been a while, and I know I'm probably gonna be. I wouldn't be surprised if I'll be even able to contact this person or not, because I know he's still around. I don't know if I'd be able to contact him, but I will try and get back to going through the weekly. It just happens sometimes whenever my mind is scrambled with what's been happening at my job. So I'll just see you next time. This has been Dark Symphony 777, and cut.